The bloom screen is a revolutionary style of indoor growing developed by an Australian-based hybrid organic nutrient company, Bloom Yellow Bottles, to overcome the challenge of restrictive plant counts. Simple premise: the bigger the plant, the bigger the fruit. You can do it too, with a little help from this easy, innovative setup and Bloom Yellow Bottles nutrients. This is a run-to-waste hydroponic system that involves screen and light adjustment. So if you are looking for a way to increase your yields and make the most out of restrictive plant counts, sit back, relax and stay tuned for this comprehensive demonstration. First, let's set up. You can adjust this style to any space dimensions. For the purpose of this video, we will use a 12 feet by 12 feet grow room. You will place a 25-gallon pot in the center of the room. On the floor around the base of the pot, you will place 6 400-watt grow lights. On the ceiling above the pot, hang 12 1000-watt grow lights. Place fans accordingly for proper ventilation. Make sure you put at least one on the floor to allow airflow through the canopy. Because this plant is going to be huge, it will be heavy, and you will want to create a strong support structure. Concrete mesh is the preferred material for this. Ideally a thickness of 1/8 inches and 6 by 6 inch individual squares, and the overall size big enough to fill the room. You will suspend the concrete mesh 1 foot above the pot. Eventually you will place a second mesh 1 foot above the first, and then a third mesh, lighter thickness is okay for this last one, 1 foot above that. Now let's get to the method. We will start with the plant. Top the clone at the center stem. This will result in the growth of 2 new main stems. You will transplant your juvenile plant with branches roughly 2 feet long into a 25-gallon pot using Coco Coir as the grow medium. This plant will not be removed again. No need to transplant. Continue in veg as usual with just the top lights on. Begin to weave the branches through the first mesh so they are growing in opposing directions to help fill the room. Depending on genetics, this weaving should take approximately 6 to 8 weeks to fill the space. As the plant starts to fill the room, turn on floor lights with a light cycle at 24 hours. Raise the lights and introduce the second mesh. Before the plant hits the second mesh, apply Bloom Pre. This will encourage an increase of branches forming, resulting in a foundation for more buds in the canopy. After the plant reaches the second mesh, add the third mesh and apply Ultra and immediately turn the lights off for 36 hours. Ultra will encourage flowering faster and only female flowers. Remember, in this method, we are trying to get the most yield out of your standard growing times and space. Pre sets up your branches and Ultra will ensure the female flowers forming off those. Once you turn the lights back on, switch to a 12-hour light cycle to transition to flower. The plant will grow into a large bush rather than your typical cone-shaped plant. Around 10 to 14 days prior to your typical harvest date, cut all of the tops off your plant. Believe it or not, this will be the smallest harvest. Sounds crazy, right? As you remove the top of the canopy, above the third mesh, you will lower the lights. Add blooms, flower enhancers, fat ooze and sweetener, and watch out for the explosion fat yields in your bottom and mid canopies. Apply final the last 2 weeks before your next harvest. This will trigger the plant to utilize the remaining nutrient storage towards flower production and negate the need to flush, while leaving 0 residues on the end product. Now it's time for your second harvest. Chop all the buds about 2 weeks, roughly 8 weeks for the flowering period. This will be about 40 to 50% greater yields than your initial harvest. You think that's it? Think again! Now that you have your plant with just leaves and stems, give it a good haircut about 1/3 of a foot below the second mesh. Remove the top mesh and drop the lights. Take a large carving knife and cut about 1 foot around the perimeter of the stem, cutting the exterior perimeter of the roots. Don't remove anything from the pot. Using Bloom Yellow Bottles sweetener plus sea fuel, these products will assist in composting the dead plant material into food for the plant. Time for your second cycle. You still have your existing plant structure with only 2 stems and leaves covering your first mesh. You will now put the light cycle back into veg for 2 weeks. Important: leave your lights on now for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. Use your normal grow nutrients and pre. Adjust the light and introduce the third mesh. Repeat the steps for the flower cycle. Genetics do play a factor in this, but most strains can endure at least 2 veg cycles, equaling 4 harvests. This method is useful for restrictive plant counts. Stay in with your limits and never go hungry. Our growers have reported producing up to 130 pounds using this method. With Bloom Yellow Bottle's nutrients and plant training, you too can take control of your crops. It starts with just one plant.